Hello and welcome to the Securus Firestarter. This is for Monday. What is it, October? Oh, damn, October 27th, Halloween coming up. I'm Rich Mogul, and joining me is Mike Rothman.
Hi, Rich.
Hi, Mike. Hey, are we missing somebody?
No. Oh, the dude with the hair. That's not gray.
Yeah.
Sort of. It's a little gray.
Even I got to get this hair buzzed back down again. Apparently, I let it go just a little bit too much, and now everybody knows I haven't had a chance to take a shower yet this morning.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Yep. Not enough hair gel in the world to fix that, man.
yeah. All right, so we got to do our usual. It's football season, Mike.
So there was very good news. The Giants were on bye, so they did not play this weekend. So that was actually a very good thing for me because, the Falcons continue to figure out how to, just crush the souls of everybody that roots for them. Up 21-0, 9:30 in the morning on Sunday, which pissed me off because that's normally my work time, right? I normally work on Sunday mornings and then I'm able to watch football the rest of the day. But they're playing in London at 9:30 in the morning. They're up 21-0 at halftime. Looking real good. Man, just totally crapped the bed in the second half. Lose on a fluke friggin' field goal and a bunch of comedy of errors. And that's when you just kind of wipe your hands, take 3 deep breaths, and go have fun with my kids, which is exactly what I did because I probably would have strangled somebody short of that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as a Broncos fan, there's been worse years. Of course,
Worst,
last year was like this
worst
until,
eras, right? The Peyton era has been pretty good for you guys.
yeah, I mean, who would have thought anyway, so that's been good. But as a CU fan, been a little rough. We've lose most of the games, but UCLA, double overtime, lost by 3. Like all these teams, good teams, were losing, but mostly just barely. So I'm actually positive because the program has been in such a bad shape for a decade or more now that it's finally since the end of the 90s there and the Rick Neuheisel years, so we're finally coming back. Anyway, we're probably losing a significant percentage of our listeners at this point.
The good
So
news is, well, I don't know. I'm not going to lose a lot of sleep over that, but we probably should talk business.
yes,
So
yes.
what we're going to talk about this week is the upcoming Amazon reInvent show is happening in 2 or 3 weeks. I can't even remember because my calendar is
November 11th.
November 11th. So 2 weeks. And it's obviously, kind of a big thing, sold out. So that was surprising to a couple of friends of ours who waited until the last minute to try to get tickets and, found themselves on the outside calling favors in order to make that happen. But, it's been kind of interesting because there are a couple of data points that we've seen over the last couple of weeks of where Amazon is really kind of starting to address a lot of those issues that you would start to think would be impeding their ability to really deploy in a global enterprise, right? And the first one is the availability of an availability zone from the Department of Redundancy Department in Germany. Right, so they put up an availability zone, which means a data center in Frankfurt, which can be totally self-contained, and obviously that's going headlong into the data privacy issues that kind of stymie a lot of folks that want to do business in a cross or pan-European type of situation. So obviously having that data center where they're basically guaranteeing that your data is going to be within the confines of Germany gives customers that want to do business in Germany and want to use the cloud obviously an option to have an answer when the regulators come in and say, how are we sure that your data is actually in Germany?
Yeah, and what's interesting here is a couple of things. I mean, one is Germany monitors probably as much or more than we do. It's their intelligence services, even since World War II, are not exactly known for having a light touch. The other piece is that there's actually, and I tweeted about this last week, there's a lawsuit where Microsoft is currently in contempt of court here in the U.S. because law enforcement demanded information from the Irish data center that was from somebody in Ireland. So it wasn't like a U.S. citizen using that data center or something along those lines, at least as far as we know. And the judge ordered them to provide that. And if they do that, they're in violation of Irish law and EU privacy laws. So Microsoft, it's like which law are you going to violate?
Rock versus hard place.
Yeah, the a true catch-22. There is no winning situation, and if that proceeds, and depending, and even the judge said you should hold yourself in contempt of court, and we will put off any of the fines or penalties as this works its way through the progressive legal system here. But if that goes through, it could be really bad because the whole reason for having these data centers in these countries is to comply with their local laws and their local regulations. I can't think of a company that can operate where they know that at any given point in time, and it's going to be eventual, they will be forced to violate the laws of the country that they're working in or the laws of the country that they're based out of, and the convolutions
Yep.
that they're going to have to go through to deal with this.
Yep.
So as exciting as it is that they stood up this data center, it's huge for Europe because it's the first one in continental Europe. I mean, not to pick on Ireland, but it is perceived differently as having it basically in the heart of Europe, in Germany or France in particular. And now that that is there, the global expansion is obvious. It is interesting, by the way, only 2 availability zones, not the usual 3 to 4 that we've gotten used to. But
Is that because of demand, you think?
it could be demand or it could be cost. I mean, look at
Right.
Amazon's financials. I mean,
Right.
they're starting to lose the support of the street as they invest so much in infrastructure. They're just loss after, I mean, massive, hundreds of millions of dollars of losses every quarter for a company that's otherwise, kicking butt. I mean, other than their whole phone thing, which was a $170 million write-off, and like
Seemed
a
like a good,
predictable $170 million write-off.
seemed like a good idea at the time.
Yeah, I mean, the fire, all the Kindles are awesome. That phone, woo. Anyway, so I mean, it's a really tough situation. So it'd be interesting to see on the legal standpoint what happens, and then yet Amazon can't not continue to expand out and try to tackle that business in that market. So maybe that's where a lot of the encryption, bring your own key stuff, and some of the auditing kind of features that they have are there. And I'll be very, very curious. I mean, that Microsoft case is a huge deal for any cloud providers.
It is, but again, I mean, I think we're at this point in development of kind of the cloud infrastructure, and that doesn't just mean the technology and the data centers and the pipes, right? But the legislation and a lot of the governance and a lot of the other aspects of a technology infrastructure that really has to be in place in order for it to truly support and over time supplant traditional data centers. I mean, all this stuff has to be worked through. So, the good news for Amazon is that it's Microsoft on kind of taking the arrows with the Irish thing. But there'll be something in Germany with kind of Amazon inevitably, or wherever else they are when they start expanding more deeply into the Asia Pac region. So again, it's something that has to happen from a maturity of the business model standpoint. So I view that as pretty positive. So for those of you who are forced to do business in places like Germany that do have pretty onerous data privacy laws, this tends to be how we think a lot of the issues going to be solved, right? With local data centers that are just additional data availability zones for the extension of the cloud infrastructure. So let's kind of change gears a little bit and talk about another pretty interesting announcement that Amazon made, which, again, these things are a couple of weeks out from re:Invent, right? So you got to start scratching your head.
What are they coming up with then?
Right. What the hell are they going to, what's Werner's keynote going to be if they're starting to, do some pretty interesting stuff a couple weeks out to build that drumbeat. But, they did announce an LDAP service. Right, so I'm not as deep on that, but it would seem to be that kind of not having the ability to stand up your own kind of integrated LDAP infrastructure within your Amazon cloud was kind of a constraint for a while, right? Most folks are using their existing Active Directory or their internal LDAP. So for larger enterprises, that's probably less of an issue. But for a lot of these cloud native companies that are starting to become a lot more substantial as we see the whole market evolve, having this kind of LDAP or integrated LDAP, kind of like integrated DNS and integrated kind of load balancing and a lot of these other infrastructure level services that Amazon has rolled out. This seems to be the latest in that kind of suite of things that are required in order for cloud native companies to really kind of replicate their infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, Microsoft has kind of had this. So they everything with Microsoft, Amazon's got their own IAM, Identity and Access Management kind of model, and you go in, you create users and groups. You can do SAML integration to integrate it with your internal directory, But Microsoft had a very different approach, which is basically it's all Active Directory based, as you would expect. And they started offering Active Directory in the cloud, so you could actually have your directory server in the cloud. Now, I know a lot of our big enterprise guys are like, WTF? Why would I ever want to do that? And you don't. I mean, think about us. I mean, we're a small company. There's we don't have a centralized infrastructure, or a lot of companies that we work with who are on the small to mid-size end have a decentralized kind of infrastructure, and the ability to have your actual directory server up in the cloud, in particular for your applications, as all of that stuff's moved into the cloud, makes a lot of sense. And so the way Amazon was doing it before is you had to integrate with SAML 2.0, which would work, and then hook into their identity and access management infrastructure internally. Now what they have is, I'm calling it platform as a service. So it's platform as a service for a directory in the cloud. You can synchronize that with your internal directory environment, but it'll work even if you don't have an internal directory. And you can actually use that for not just for your own users, but think about if you're pushing out consumer apps and such. Now you don't have to actually build a directory server from scratch. So a lot of even consumer-facing applications, you have to have a user directory someplace. This can now provide that as well. So there's a lot of different, kind of use cases for this. So there's, first there was Amazon, or I'm sorry, Microsoft with Azure, and so you could get that use model. Then there's a startup that we've done some work with, Jump Cloud. Those guys built it as more as a SaaS offering, and less as, so they do, it's all a SaaS-based kind of multi-tenant environment.
And integrated with a lot of the other cloud providers, so it just becomes a logical extension, right?
Yeah, they're on their own. You can integrate it with any of the different, it's kind of that service agnostic piece to integrate with, and they're focusing on like the usability and everything else to slim it down. Microsoft is very AD centric, obviously.
Shockingly enough, right?
Go figure. And then, as much people hate AD, man, it's turned out to be a very powerful tool for us. And then now Amazon, which is more LDAP based, and it's very PaaS-y, platform as a service. You gotta pick your size and do your capacity planning and the kind of those kinds of pieces. That's one area I think actually where Microsoft is doing better. And James Arlen, who works with us, he's been hooking me on more of what Azure's been doing the past couple of years, where they're actually making a lot of this stuff much simpler and faster to get up and running for people, particularly if you have experience in the Microsoft world. Amazon is still very very kind of developer and opsy focus. So you have to know what you're doing, but you can stand up that directory in the cloud. And so really interesting, a lot of use cases, because you can stand them up for your consumer-facing applications. You can integrate it with your internal directory server. And so then the latency issues and everything go away. People can log in natively to the cloud without having to log into the local directory and get a ticket that then federates out into the cloud. So it's, it enables a whole, because there are, as great as federation is, what if somebody just wants to pick up their phone and log into the service remotely without going onto the local network? And if they don't have an active ticket, there's DNS redirection. There's a lot of weirdnesses that have to occur, and this can get around those issues. So I think it's a very, kind of an interesting area, and another evolution of pushing more of the inside up to the cloud, things that we thought people would never ever trust cloud providers to do before, and yet now those are becoming competing features, and we went from 0 to 3 different products doing that. I think in the span of a year or less, and 2 of them basically within the span of the past few months. I don't know what else there is to say. It's another sign of the changing scenarios of how we're actually building our organizations and our infrastructure.
And the reality that this business is maturing, right? We've been doing this a long time, and kind of a lot of that. It usually takes years for some type of new technology to gain that kind of enterprise class veneer. You know what I'm saying? Where
Yep.
kind of a lot of those things that, unless you're a Fortune 10 bank, you're like, why the hell would I need to do that, right? But a lot of the companies that are out there, necessarily learn that the hard way, as those Fortune 10 companies, kind of put them through the ringer, and make them build all sorts of things that you'd sit there and go, why the hell would I do that, right? And what we're seeing is a lot of these cloud infrastructure providers moving down that direction a lot faster, which again doesn't mean all these huge companies are moving all their stuff to the cloud tomorrow, but they're playing around with it enough, and they know what they need because they've obviously been doing it for 100 years internally. So now they're at a point where they're like, I've got to have this stuff, and the cloud guys are far more adaptive and responsive than your typical enterprise class software thing. And again, I think a lot of that plays into the cloud model, which is put it in there, everybody gets access to it almost immediately, as opposed to do software drops every 6 months, and if you miss a feature, you're out of luck, right? I mean, these things can be launched daily, if not multiple times a day, and not that the infrastructure providers do that, but the fact is you don't have to wait for a huge drop of infrastructure and then a huge upgrade cycle in places where change control is very difficult in order to take advantage of a lot of these capabilities. So from where we sit, I'd say it's all good in cloud land, right? Doesn't make it easy, right? Doesn't make it secure yet, but in terms of seeing a lot of the evolution that we would expect to see, it continues to happen at a pace that I certainly can't recall. But I'm not the all-knowing soothsayer of everything that's ever happened. So maybe it's happened in the past. I just can't remember it.
Yeah, and what's kind of fascinates me is because normally as analysts we don't use technology. I guess that's our reputation, and obviously we adopt a lot of this stuff, and we're all on it. We develop and play with things and get as dirty as possible. And a lot of these things that I see kind of coming out are ones that are logical obstacles you run into when you hit a certain point of maturity in your use of cloud. The directory service is one. So we are very decentralized. I have both, done various proof of concept apps, things that I use in my conference demos these days, as well as just for research, as well as managing our infrastructure. And we don't have a server anymore anywhere. And so everything we do is in the cloud, and that's become a problem for me is our IT admin. When I have to provision a new user, there is no directory, there's no nothing, for me to go to, and so I have to go through a very manual process that otherwise I would need to. There's a lot of convoluted ways I could have resolved that, which I will have to if we get any bigger. Now, there's still only the three of us full-time guys, but we have we seem to bring in a lot of our friends, and all of them need access. And so that is a very, that needing, dealing with those directories, dealing with it when architecting applications, when I work with companies, because frequently now a lot of the work I'm doing is helping like SaaS providers, improve or design the security of their applications. This becomes an issue, dealing with those user authentication pieces, employee authentication pieces, auditing, canonical sources. All of these are obstacles you run into as you start jumping onto these technologies. And so there's a lot of hacks that I keep having to tell people to use, and then vendors are coming out, with direct answers, because obviously the client demand is there. There's crypto stuff we've been talking about, similar kind of a thing. CloudTrail, we know more CloudTrail. The auditing within Amazon is coming out because organizations are really pushing hard to get more and more monitoring of their employees and stuff, because the hacks to get around that are very non-cloudy. I mean, Netflix had to build their own like gateway tool and open source it.
Well, right, and then totally change how they groom traffic through their cloud infrastructure, which defeats the purpose of all this stuff, right? And that's looking at it from the network security standpoint. That continues to be a huge problem, right? And that you have a whole bunch of technologies that are really built towards I need to see your traffic, but if I'm routing traffic to a point where I have to put it through a bottleneck, again, that's non-cloudy. Right, so it's one of these things that we're in this weird purgatory of sorts, where we can't totally get rid of the old models, but we're not really ready for 100% to the new models yet. So we're kind of just flapping around, and there are some folks that are going to do it better than others, and I think there'll be a lot of technology that starts to show up over the next 12 to 18 months that are really focused on addressing some of these issues. But at the end of the day, remember. In the olden days, as my kids say, right? In the olden days, before we had like these phones with like music and movies and all these other things, in the olden days we used to have to wait for years for this level of maturity. Now we're kind of peeved because the stuff isn't ready in 6 months, which again, just shows how much faster things are going. So we may have extended our welcome at this point, but because obviously the two of us could sit and shoot the crap about this probably for a couple hours. But again, I mean, I think that reInvent will be very interesting in a couple of weeks to see what kind of shock and awe that Amazon, has planned, and I suspect they do have some shock and awe planned. And by the way, we will all be there. So Rich,
Yep.
myself, and Adrian will be there pretty much all week. So if you folks are there, drop us a note and let us know. We'd love to grab a beer or coffee, during some of the breaks, and just find out what you guys have going on. Because again, it is an area of very, very active and pertinent research for where we're taking our company and our research. So we'd be happy to chat with you. So hopefully we'll see you in Vegas in a couple weeks. And what else you got, man?
Mike and Adrian are even paying for their tickets. So
How
I got an analyst
does
pass,
that happen?
but yeah, this is the first time I think they have paid
Well,
for.
we may be the cheapest two individuals that I know. So the fact that we are actually buying tickets to this thing, I think is pretty indicative of the fact that we see this as pretty strategic to, where everything is going. So again, hope to see everybody there because it'll be great.
Yeah, yeah. So we'll see you there, and we're also keeping an eye on Google, IBM, and Microsoft. Those are the other ones that, there's other companies out there, but those, in particular, the Google and the Microsoft are the ones that work on. So it's just Amazon's now they've got the bigger event as well, and they're the most mature, and it'll be interesting. So drop us a line if you're there. We are there to learn. We are not doing a bunch of business development meetings.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Now
we're in
I
sessions
was
all
talking
day,
to
every
users,
day, but
right?
yeah,
People that use cloud. If you're selling cloud stuff, not interested.
yeah, exactly. So. All right, so we'll call it with that. We went over, so it's all because Adrian wasn't here to silently stare at us and keep us on track. And with that, I hope everybody has a great week. Thanks.